음. Good afternoon, distinguished speakers, respected moderators, honorable lecturers, committee members, and participants joining us from different universities and countries around the world. Welcome back to day 2 of IRUD Summer Course 2026. My name is Dandy.
And I'm Akmal. It is our pleasure to accompany you throughout today's program on behalf of the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us this afternoon.
We're delighted to have all of you back with us as we continue the second day of IRUD Summer Course 2026. We hope today's discussions will inspire thoughtful conversations, broaden your perspectives, and provide valuable insights throughout the program.
Before we begin, we'd like to share a few reminders. Please remember to complete today's attendance through the link shared in the room chat or on the official WhatsApp group if you haven't done so already. As always, please keep your cameras on whenever possible and your microphone mute unless invited to speak by the moderator. We also encourage everyone to prepare your question for the Q&A session later. After all, this is your opportunity to speak up,
think deep, and dig deeper. So, our first panel discussion this afternoon will feature distinguished speaker Mr. Maula Hudaya, SHUP in MA from Universitas Diponegoro, will present on global justice at a crossroads, power, norms, and the future of international law. And to guide us through this discussion, it is our pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Mr. Fendi Eko Wahyudi, SIP MHUPIN.
Mr. Fendi Eko Wahyudi, SIP MHUPIN, is a lecturer at the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro. His academic expertise focuses on globalizations, transnationalism, and global political economy, with extensive experiences in international collaborative research, examining contemporary global issues and governance. Given his expertise in global affairs and international cooperation, we are delighted to have him guide today's discussion on global justice at a crossroad, power, norms, and the future of international law.
Yes, as you can see on the screen, we have his very remarkable CV. And ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming our moderator, Mr. Fendi Eko Wahyudi, SIP MHUPIN. Sir, the time and floor are yours.
Okay, thank you so much, MC, Mas Akmal, and Mas Dandi. So, good morning, evening, or maybe late night, ladies and gentlemen, all participants. So, welcome and thank you for joining us virtually for the second day of IRUD Summer Course 2026. So, where our overarching theme is international crimes and the struggle for justice, power, norms, and the future of international law. It is wonderful to see the enthusiasm from everyone gathered in this virtual room. And before we proceed further, I kindly ask everyone maybe to keep your microphone muted during the presentation, and feel free to turn on your cameras if your connection allows. So our session will be feels more interactive. And in our first session today, we'll be we will be dividing into very interesting and essential topic that is called global justice under strategic pressure, geopolitical risk, and astropolitics and the fragmentation of international order. So this topic is highly relevant for us to discuss together as it will explore a narrative lecture on how norms, power, and technology reshape the future of global order. So through today's discussion, we hope to gain new insight into the misalignment that occurs when norms remain general, power becoming more contested, and technological change the facts on the ground or in orbit. And unfortunately, before institution can stabilize them. So to dig deeper to this topic, we are joined by an expert who is highly esteemed in their field, So I would like also to invite Mr. Maula Hudaya. So please welcome Maula Hudaya. And then let's give a big round of applause for Mr. Maula. Maybe you can try to give reaction through your Zoom account. Yeah, yeah. Let's make it more live. So currently, Maula Hudaya or Mas Maula or Mr. Maula serve as a lecturer in our department, Department of International Relations at Universitas Diponegoro, Indonesia. And uh, okay, as you can see on the screen, here are a few highlights of the speaker's background. So Mr. Maula main research interests are in the field of geopolitics and geostrategy, and then also interestingly, astropolitics, and then global international relation and strategic studies. Maula Hudaya also currently working on journal article entitled Bebas Aktif Beyond Earth, or Indonesia's negotiated dependency in a global astropolitical contestation. So the speaker recently, it is just fresh from the oven, published a chapter entitled Southeast Asia's engagement with BRICS Plus, seeking ontological security in the multipolar world order as part of Palgrave Macmillan's International Political Economy series. So, good evening, Mas Maula, Mr. Maula.
Hello, good evening, I guess, Mas Fendi.
Yeah,
How are you?
okay, I'm very good. And thank you so much for being here and taking the time to share your knowledge with all of us today. And hopefully, we can hear your very insightful presentation. And then, without further ado, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. The committee, can you help me share my presentation?
Okay, is there anyone from the committee can help to share the screen for the presentation? Just wait for a moment. Okay, maybe we can try to make it full screen. Yeah, okay. I think
Okay.
okay.
Okay, all good. Thank you very much, Mas Fendi. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be able to join this session and share a little bit of my, well, actually, it is my current research as well. Today, I would like to invite you to discuss about global justice, but from a quite different perspective, as today I will not, oh yeah, sorry. I'm here to replace Professor Ikariswanti Putranti, who cannot attend the session due to a personal condition, but I will do my best to take over her topics, but I will, as I said before, I will take you to discuss about global justice in a whole different perspective. As I said, as Mas Fendi has explained before, that today I will bring you not only in the Earth's surface, but beyond the Earth orbit. Let's say we will talk about the outer space mainly about this topic. Please, next slide. Continue to the next slide, please. Okay, let us begin with the familiar story. When people talk about crisis of global justice, the discussion often starts in the courtroom, right? We often talk about the ICC, the ICJ, humanitarian law, or many other tribunal court that actually deals with such international and also international and also transnational crime, right? But the usual argument, sorry, when we talk about global justice and about international law, is often argues that powerful states often engage selectively with international norm. And there is popular, let's say, popular opinion or popular argument that international law and international law forum, like the court, the tribunal, is the weapon of the weak, because the weaker country, the middle power country, let's say, they did not have any other option other than obey the international law. But for the major power, the powerful states, they have option beyond obeying the international norms, let alone international law. They can selectively participating in, let's say, international law forum. They can avoid it whenever the forum is not in accordance to their, let's say, interests. It is happen that the major power countries usually they support international law whenever it strengthens their legitimacy, protect their interests, or constrain their rivals. But when the same rules begin limiting their own actions, they may challenge the institution or maybe even reject the authority. It happened once in the case of China and Philippines in the UNCLOS tribunal, that China reject the, let's say, reject the court that put Philippines in favors, and the conflict still going on. This this phenomena creates an obvious legitimacy problems. If rules appears universal in language, but then it becomes very selective in applications, other states may begin asking whether the system is generally impartial. That is an important concern, but I would argue that selective compliance is only first layer of the problem in this whole topics, because it focuses on what happened after rule already exists. The deeper question is, who had the power to shape the rule in the first place, interpret it, and also make it effective in the first place? So, who is actually, let's say, had the power to shape the rule itself? Please continue the slides. Next, please. Okay, so I want to move the discussion from compliance to authority. Global justice is not about whether actors obey rules. It is also about who defines what responsible behavior means. Who decides whether a situation is normal or exceptional. Whose interpretation becomes internationally accepted, and who has enough material power to make that interpretation matter. International law may formally recognize sovereign equality, but states remain deeply unequal in, let's say, if we talk about military power, economic influence, technological capability, and control over global infrastructure. This matter in, let's say, when we talk about the international law, this matter. This means that equality on paper does not always become equality in practice, because stronger country tends to avoid the law when it is not in their favor, and then they obey the law whenever it is in their favor, or maybe not in their rivals' favor. Although powerful actors do not always need to reject a norm openly, they may shape its interpretation, influence institutional procedures, or establish practices that others later have to accept. So the crisis of global justice is not only produced by violation, but it can also be produced by unequal participation in the creation of international order itself. And this becomes even more important when technology change faster than institution can respond. Next, please. Okay. This brings us to the central argument of this presentation, that global justice becomes fragile when norms, power, and technology move at different speeds. Norms usually speak in universal language, such as peace, equality, responsibility, humanity, and common interests. Power, however, is unevenly distributed. Some states possess far greater economic influence, military capacity, technological capability, and institutional access than others. And technology moves even faster. New capabilities can appear before international institutions have decided how they should be governed. We see this in the case of AI. Like 5 years ago, AI is not as intelligent as today's, right? Even like 2 years ago, when we used ChatGPT to write something, the writing is still pretty bad. It's still very easy to let's say to differentiate between which one is human made, which one is AI generated, and also for picture generating, also editing. Nah, only in 5 years, let's say, the technology has let's say has developed very quickly, and it shapes the game very differently, right? Like 2 or 5 years ago, no one really concerned about the deepfake content, for example, because it can be easily we can easily tell which one is deepfake, which one is not. But today, even the deepfake content seems like it is legit, right? We can no longer distinguish which one is AI, which one is let's say genuine content. This, however, leaves the leaves the law about it behind. Technology comes first, then law must adapt to the technology, let's say technology advancement. It is similar to the realm of cyber operation, autonomous weapon, digital platforms, and also the outer space. The case is similar, guys. So the problems is not always there are no rules. The rules is indeed present, but the problem is that broad norms remain relatively stable. Norms and rules move way slower than technological advancement itself, right? While the political and technological reality changes very quickly. This creates uncertainty. Like for now, up to this time, the clear regulation of the AI usage is remain uncertain, remain unclear. For example, actors may agree on general principles, but disagree on what those principles mean in practice. This is one of the, let's say, most likely obstacle in this discussion, because sometimes everyone agree about the general principles, but when it comes to the detailed interpretation, the argument may differ. It is different. It is difficult thing to resolve. And that gap between universal language, unequal capability, and rapid technological change is where geopolitical risk actually begin. Next, please. Okay, to understand why this gap matters, we need to briefly look at the premise of the Cold War order, the post-Cold War order, sorry. After the Cold War, there was strong expectation that the international system was moving toward a more institutionalized and rules-based order, in which international institutions expanded globally. Human rights became increasingly central to the global political languages, international accountability became more visible. And of course, conflict and double standard did not disappear. It has happened actually, but there was a general belief that international norms were becoming more universal. But the problem is that sharing a common vocabulary does not necessarily mean sharing authority. Different actors may all speak about peace, responsibility, cooperation, or rule of law while understanding those ideas differently. So the language may be universal, but the power to define its meaning may still be concentrated. This is why I don't think that the current crisis should be described simply as disappearance of norm. Norms still matter. The deeper issue is that the authority is becoming more contested, more uneven, and more widely distributed. Next, please. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, today, the international order is not simply collapsing. No, that's way oversimplification. What we are seeing in this case is more complicated system in which authority is spread across different institutions, regions, coalition, companies, and technical bodies. In lunar cooperation, for example, the US promotes the Artemis Accords while China and its partners are developing the International Lunar Research Station, or the ILRS. Well, I'm not going to say that it is necessarily to rigid or fully opposing blocks, but they show that international cooperation might increasingly develop through parallel pathways. Meanwhile, regional organizations also emphasize different priorities. The EU, for example, they focus strongly on resilience, regulation, security, and strategic autonomy. While African Union, they also have like their own space policy in which they emphasize on climate resilience, connectivity, development, and technological capacity. While ASEAN, our own region, we tend to focus on practical applications such as disaster management, navigation, agriculture, environmental monitoring, and regional connectivity. At the same time, private companies operate communication satellites systems with global political consequences. And technical institutions such as the International Telecommunication Union shape everyday operations of space through frequency coordination and orbital registration. So, authority no longer comes from one place. It is increasingly shared, contested, and sometimes fragmented. Please next. Outer space makes this contradiction between universal norms and unequal capabilities especially visible. Outer space is often described as a domain that should benefit all humanity. In principle, it is open to all states. However, in practice, only relatively small numbers of government and companies possess major launch capabilities, satellite constellation, and advanced data system, or the ability to conduct lunar mission. As for the latest data from the the latest data shows that there are only around 16 space agency who possess capability to launch satellite to the outer space. While there are so many countries in this world, and all of the countries are affected by the space infrastructure that these 16 countries send to the space, right? So a domain may be formally open while remaining materially hierarchical. A country may have the legal right to explore outer space, but without financial resources, infrastructure, technological expertises, or independent access to launch system, that right may remain largely symbolic. This is why astropolitics is such a useful lens. It acts almost like a stress test for global justice, actually, in this presentation. It focuses to us whether formal equality is really enough when operational capacity is extremely unequal. Next, please. Okay, at this point, outer space may still sound distant to you, but believe me, actually, most of us have already interacted with bring A to sometimes you check the or in your maybe your friend's city, and when you order transportation through application, for example, in our country there is Gojek, Grab, and etc. Follow the flight through Flight Radar 24 if you like it, or you use delivery service. That actually you are already interacted with the space infrastructure in which those activities are using satellites. Satellite systems here were probably involved in that kind of activities. Satellites supports navigation, communication, banking, weather forecasting, agriculture, and many other sectors, actually. And for our country, for Indonesia, this is especially important because we are, a very fast archipelagic state in which we have to monitor the entire territory of ours. That we need to monitor the disaster risk because Indonesia is located in the Ring of Fire, with often experiencing earthquakes and climate-related disaster. We need that satellites to disaster risk management actually. And monitoring such a large territory would be extremely difficult for satellite data. So in this case, astropolitics, if you think astropolitics is about, like the sci-fi Star Wars, when you fight another, let's say another race from another planet, and you fight them in the outer space. No, that's not what astropolitics about. But astropolitics is actually also includes about what happened above Earth, but it is related to our daily activities. It's highly related about our daily activities. So it is not something distant from our life, actually. It is about how space-based infrastructure then shapes political, economic, and social life on Earth. Once we recognize space as infrastructure, question of ownership, access, dependency, and vulnerability become much more immediate. Please next. Okay, the foundational norms of outer space governance are remarkably inclusive, as the Outer Space Treaty states that the outer space should be free for exploration and use by all states. It is also says that activities should be conducted for benefit and interest of all countries, and basically all human race. Outer space is not subject to national appropriation. Well, it is stated in the Outer Space Treaty, and this is very ambitious promise. It is suggests that outer space should not only become another territory dividing among the strongest actor, but the principle immediately raises difficult questions. What does benefit for all countries mean in practice? That need to be answered. How does all of the countries in this world can agree about what benefit for all countries mean. Of course, when they ask about this question, they will answer it differently, right? And then, does it mean access to satellite data as open source data? But I don't think that the country that owns the satellite will agree to this. In the matter of fact, the government of Indonesia, for example, they have to spend like 475 billion rupiahs annually only to purchase like the satellite pictures about our our weather and our potential about climate related disaster. Well, I don't think it is benefit for all countries, right? And how about technology transfer? When it come to technology transfer, many major powers are often very like they use strategic egoism. Like they tend to not share they tend to not share their most advanced technology to the other because they still see the outer space as the new geopolitical high ground. Well, the Treaty of Outer Space gives us broad principle, but it does not fully resolve how those principle should work in a much more commercial, technological, and competitive environment. And this is where unequal capability begins shaping interpretation. Next, please. Okay, launching and operating space system requires money, expertise, infrastructure, supply chains, regulatory capacity, and long-term investment. The same is true for lunar mission, advanced remote sensing, satellite constellation, and space-based defense system. This produce what we might call operational hierarchy. Imagine like a library that is officially open to everyone. However, only some people have transportation, membership document, language skills, and enough time to use it. The formal right is equal. The formal right is equal. It is open for everyone. But in practical, their ability is not equal, right? Outer space operates on much larger scale, but the logic is similar. Capability affects influence. So although the main idea is equality, but not all countries in this world have similar funding. Not they may not have similar amount of maybe funding and also similar infrastructure to be able to access it equally with their counterparts. It has become a problem as well. Please next. Okay, so this is where the first mover advantage. Sorry, previous slides. Can you move to the slide 11? Okay, wait a minute.
Is it this one, Maula?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Okay, so this is where the first mover advantage becomes important. Technology often develops faster than multilateral negotiations. An actor first develops a capability, That capability produces repeated practice, while other actors then adapt to practice. Governments then regulate it, companies copy it, the international organization later beginning to discuss it. And over time, something that began as the activity of one actor may start appearing normal. This is how practice can gradually become authority. Think about social media platforms. Governments spend years discussing how they should be regulated, but by the time regulation is arrived, the platform had already shaped user behavior, advertising system, content rules, and public communication. Regulation enter a reality that the companies had already helped create. Something similar can happen in outer space. By the time states agree on detailed rules for lunar activities, for the example, governments and companies may already have launched mission, select sites, establish infrastructure, and develop operating procedure. Those who move first do not automatically own the future, but they gain a powerful opportunity to shape what later appears normal. So that's the point. Please move to the next slide. Okay, this leads us to the issue of fragmentation. Although fragmentation does not mean that international politics become lawless. A fragmented order may actually contain many rules. There are maybe treaties, national laws, voluntary principles, regional regulation, technical standard, coalition agreements, and corporate practice. But the problem is that this arrangement may not always fit together. Different actors may participate in different systems and interpret the same principle differently. So the main risk is not always regulatory absence. It is regulatory divergence. More rules do not automatically create more clarity. If they emerge from different political and technological centers, states and companies may become uncertain about which standards apply and whether others will recognize them. Fragmentation can be manageable when there is communication, transparency, and interoperability. It becomes more dangerous when actors no longer agree on how their system should interact or how disputes should be resolved. Next, please. Okay, why does this matter in practical terms? Because norms are connected to infrastructure, actually. A disagreement about rules can influence whose systems are used. Those systems create dependency, then dependency creates vulnerability, and disruption produce political, economic, and humanitarian consequences. The 2022 cyber attack against Viasat, KASAT network, is a useful example. The attack occurred around the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It disrupted the communication in Ukraine, but the consequences also affected users elsewhere in Europe. The infrastructure did not follow the neat geographical boundaries of the conflict, as the effect may be broader, right? A strategic action connected to one battlefield generated wider transnational consequences. Let's say if we want to attack like our neighbor satellites, the effect may be affected to the other countries, which also using the same similar satellites. This is what I mean when I say that geopolitical risk travels through infrastructure. Infrastructure connects civilian, commercial, government, and also even military users. So this is one of the most concerning problem when we talk about space infrastructure, in which satellites, even as civilian satellites, can be dual use into both civilian and also military purposes. For example, for surveillance. So disruption in one political context can create consequences far beyond the original target. This next. Okay. Space activities are governed through several sources of authority at the same time. Treaties create formal obligation, soft law principle shape expectations, national legislation regulates companies and authorized missions, technical standard then determine how systems communicate and operate, technical standard determine how systems communicate and operate, corporate practices influence access, data use, cybersecurity, and service condition. Each of these sources may claim some form of legitimacy, but the difficulty begins when they move in different directions. A company may follow its national law, but provide services globally. In other words, any country that use this specific company services, they must also follow the home country of this company's rule, right? Then a coalition may promote principles that are not usually accepted. Then a technical standard may become dominant before a political agreement has been reached. At first, this difference may appear technical, but over time they can become geopolitical. Countries may face pressure to join particular technological or regulatory ecosystem. Companies may need to comply with several different systems, and smaller states may become rule takers rather than genuine part in defining the rules. Next, please. Okay, international cooperation always involves some level of dependence. No country produces every technology or operates every service independently. So strategic autonomy should not mean complete self-sufficiency. The real problem is dependency without alternative or guarantees. A country may rely on foreign-owned systems for communication, navigation, weather data, and maritime monitoring or disaster response. Under normal conditions, they may be efficient and beneficial, since let's say a country did not have to create and launch its own satellites. But what happens if access is disrupted by conflict, sanction, cyber attack, and any other geopolitical events? Starlink's role in Ukraine illustrates this issue. The problem is not that Ukraine was wrong to use this service. It provided a highly important capability, of course, but the analytical question is what happens when an essential national function depends on infrastructure whose ownership and ultimate decision-making authority are located elsewhere. A practical response is diversification. A strategic autonomy, therefore, may mean diversified dependence rather than isolation. The objective is not to avoid partnership, but to avoid having no alternative. So dependency must always be negotiated. We must always have, let's say, other alternative. Next, please. Okay, another important risk comes from dual-use technology. Many space systems have both civilians and military function. Let's say a communication satellites may connect remote communities while also supporting military operations. Then Earth observation systems can monitor forest disaster, but they can also provide intelligence. Navigation signal, guide aircraft, ships, delivery services, farmers, and smartphone, but they also support military coordination and weapon system. This creates ambiguity in which during conflict it may be difficult to determine whether a particular system is civilian, indirectly supporting military activity, or fully military. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, then the growing role of private actors adds another layers of complexity. Private companies now operate launch systems, satellite constellation, communication networks, remote sensing services, and data platform. Well, we can talk about like Starlink and Blue Origins. Let's say that the capability that previously exclusive for states now are owned by the companies also. However, this does not mean that states are disappearing or become irrelevant. States still provide regulation, contracts, fundings, and security support, but practical authority is increasingly shared between governments and the companies. This creates difficult question. Then who is responsible when access is interrupted? Then can a corporate decision affect an international crisis? Well, it does happen. When we talk about the case of Starlink in Ukraine, once again, Ukraine in this case, they don't have any alternative beside Starlink. And it is, let's say, it is affect their strategic autonomy, in which when they want to use the Starlink services to launch an attack to Russian fleet in Sevastopol, Elon Musk, a private actor, denies the access. So this case shows the example that, let's say, the strategic autonomy of a state actor could be limited by non-state actor, and even in this case, individual, because Elon Musk did not want to involve to such work conduct, he said. Okay, next, please. Okay, so in the space sector, first mover advantage is not only economic, it can also become political and normative influence. An actor that develops a capability first introduce operating practices, terminology, procedures, and technical standards are often become the, let's say, norm makers in the sector. Other actors must then respond to it. Some may copy the practice and others may challenge it. But even opposition requires engaging with the reality that has already been created by the first mover. Over time, the initial practice may become a reference point for future governance. By the time multilateral negotiations conclude, major investment may already have been made. Infrastructure may already exist. Changing the system may become politically and economically difficult. This is why participation must begin early. States with limited technological capability should not wait until dominant arrangements have become permanent before entering the discussion. Otherwise, consultation might happen, only after the most important decisions have effectively been made. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay, the moon gives us an early preview of how future governance may develop. It is no longer viewed only as a scientific destination, but it is connected to prestige, technology, infrastructure, strategic competition, and possible resources activities. The Artemis Accord, shaped by the United States this year, and the International Lunar Research Station show how lunar cooperation might develop through different centers. This does not mean that the world already divided into two rigid lunar blocks. The situation remains fluid in this case, but it does suggest that the future governance may develop through parallel and partially overlapping architectures. Imagine two groups building different operating systems for a new digital environment. Both might support safety and innovation, but they may develop different partnership procedures and standards. The existence of two systems is not automatically a problem, but the risk begins when participation in one makes cooperation with the other increasingly difficult. The moon is therefore more than a destination. It is an early test of whether plural institutional arrangement can remain coordinated or become increasingly divided. Next, please. So, how about Global South? If we talk about highly technological matters, Global South often left behind, right? But the Global South itself is already inside the astropolitics. Sometimes Global South presented as being outside the space competition, but the reality is not. Many developing countries in the Global South already depend heavily on the satellite system. Well, even though not as the first mover, like I said before, they use them for communication, climate monitoring, and disaster management, and etc. Then the Global South is therefore already inside the politics through its exposure and dependency. Mostly about dependency to the global north as well. But yeah, the problem is that exposure is not always matched by influence, as countries may be highly affected by decisions concerning satellite services, spectrum, orbital congestion, technical standard, and data access while possessing limited rule-making power. The African Space Agency offers an important alternative perspective in which they prioritize, its priorities are not framed mainly around a prestige space race to the moon. They emphasize connectivity, climate resilience, resources management, early warning, and African technology capacity. This reminds us that different regions may define astropolitics differently. A major power may see the moon as strategic frontier and bring up the astropolitics as new geopolitical high ground. But the global south countries may see it differently since they don't have the luxury to make astropolitics the geopolitical high ground, so they may be focused on this kind of matters. Next, please. Okay, then how about Indonesia? Okay, for Indonesia, the most relevant objectives is not to compete directly with major space powers, as I have to acknowledge that Indonesia is not major space power in this case, but the more important issue for us is strategic autonomy. Indonesia requires satellite infrastructure for connectivity and more importantly, disaster response and also maritime monitoring. Because our territory is very vast archipelago with a very vast area of ocean as well. So we need at least as the meteorology agency of Indonesia said that at least we need 9 fully operational satellites just to monitor the climate-related disaster real time with no delay. But now we only have 2, and well, actually we have like 8 to 10 satellites, but only 2 are focused in disaster risk management, and the rest is for connectivity and also communication. Nah, this creates opportunities, but also creates dependency. Strategic autonomy does not mean rejecting foreign partnership or producing every technology domestically. It means maintaining rooms for maneuver. Indonesia, with the bebas active principle, should understand the systems on which it depends, develop sufficient domestic capacity to use and interpret data, diversify its partnership, and participate actively in rulemaking. The planned ASEAN-India telemetry tracking and command station in Biak in Papua Island in Indonesia is a useful example. Indonesia's role in astropolitics then does not need to begin with sending astronauts to the moon, but it can begin with ground infrastructure, regional data cooperation, technical expertise, and practical services. For Indonesia, a satellite image that help detect forest fire and any other disasters, and also illegal fishing monitoring is way more strategically needed than to weaponize it, right? Please, next. Okay. Fragmentation is not a single destiny. So far, I have described several pressures, but fragmentation does not lead to only one possible future. The first scenario, is manage pluralism. Different system and partnership continue to exist, but they maintain communication, interoperability, and basic standards. The second is competitive blocks. Technological system, supply chains, regulation, and partnership may become increasingly divided as, let's say, similar to the era of the Cold War, right? When countries face pressure to align with one ecosystem or another. The third is normative breakdown, in which shared restraint weakness, unilateral action increases, and confidence in international rules declines. Then the last one is inclusive renewal, in which current pressures lead to institutional reform, wider participation, clearer responsibility for private sectors, and stronger transparency. These are not predictions, but this is how we can, this is not a prediction, but it is what the future might be with the current fragmentation in rule-making system, right? Different sectors might experience different scenarios at a time. Security cooperation might become more divided while disaster data sharing remains relatively open. Then the key point is that fragmentation does not have one inevitable outcome. Political choices will determine whether pluralism remains manageable or become confrontational. Please, next. So what should be done? The solution is not necessarily to create political vision that controls everyone. The international system is already plural. The real task is to coordinate that pluralism without allowing it to become permanent division. This requires transparency, interoperability, crisis communication, infrastructure protection, inclusive participation, and shared responsibility. Okay, I think we should jump to the next slide. This will be the last slide. Okay, this brings us back to the central issue of global justice. The future of global justice will depend not only whether rule exists, it will depend on who participates in writing, interpreting, and implementing them. Outer space gives us an early warning. We can already see universal principle interacting with unequal capabilities. Rapid technological changes, private infrastructure, strategic rivalry, parallel governance arrangement. These dynamics are not unique to space. They also appear in artificial intelligence, climate technology, digital platform, critical minerals, and also global supply chains. Astropolitics simply makes the pattern especially visible. The central question is whether technological advanced actors will define the future first or ask others to adapt later, or whether emerging governance can be genuinely co-authored. Co-authorship does not mean that every country possesses identical technology, but it means that unequal capabilities should not automatically become permanent equality in political voice. So it is not a justice when, let's say, the global South countries who does not possess similar technology advancement like the global North, but they also affected by what the global North decided, but they have no chance to, let's say, to define the rule, to define how they will be affected by the rule. It is not justice. So that's all my presentation. I give it back to Mas Wendy. Thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon.
Well, thank you very much, Mas Maula, for that incredibly insightful and thought-provoking presentation, I think. And then you have certainly given us a lot to think about regarding how norms, power, and technology are converging to reshape the future of our global order. I'm kind of curious about the issues like what Max Weber says, like the issue of on the concept of power, control, authority, and legitimacy, and also sovereignty in the age of astropolitics. Maybe later on we can discuss about all that. But we will now move on to the Q&A session, and then we have allocated time for a discussion. And I think this is a great opportunity for all participants to delve deeper into the complexities of the astropolitics and international law that were just presented. And if you have a question or a comment for the speaker, Mr. Maula, you may participate in two ways. First, you can ask directly. Maybe please use the, I don't know, raise hand feature on your screen. And then once I call your name, please unmute your microphone and then briefly introduce yourself and state your question clearly. Or secondly, and then I think some of you already submit your question, you can use it via chat that can be used in the Zoom, in your Zoom. If you prefer, you may type your question directly into the chat box and then please include your name, and hopefully you can also add your institution, and I will read your question out loud for Mas Maula to be answered. So, all right, the floor is now is open. And then who, okay, we already have several, okay, raise hand. Okay, so maybe we can start with Raisha Rahmawati. So please, Miss Raisha Rahmawati.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity and for the very interesting lectures. From the slides, you mentioned about the diversified dependence, or maybe in international relations, we call it like hedging for the developing nations, right? Um, and we don't have such technologies as first movers have. So my question is, when developing countries are doing this hedging stuff, are they actually building strategic autonomy, or they're just simplifying doing such security vulnerabilities for the futures? I'm not. I mean, I'm not sure. Is it like we're going to catch up with the technologies that the first movers countries have? But what do you think about that? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Raisha. Can you tell us from where is your institution?
Oh yeah, I'm Indonesian, but now I'm studying in Moscow State Institute of International Relations.
Ah, okay, she's from Russia. At what time is it for now? Over there?
Now it's almost 12 p.m. Yeah.
Ah, okay, 12 p.m. Okay, thank you so much, Miss Raisha. Okay, maybe we can take all of the question first, and I'm sorry, maybe we cannot cover all of the question, but maybe I want to hear the question from, okay, from Mr. Ivan Moshev. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Thank you, Mr. Ivan.
Thank you so much, dear lecturers. It's a great pleasure to see you, and it was a real, let's say, pleasure and honor to listen to your, let's say, presentation. So, I would love to raise the following question. I guess all of now known about the US Golden Dome project under their national security strategy and their national defense strategy. So my first question is how do you assess what are the risks and prospects of these projects for the other, let's say, uh, international actors, given into that astropolitics geopolitical situation? This is first one. Um, second question is that to what extent do you think that is it possible some kind of that space would be exposed to some kind of, let's say, arms race? To what extent is it possible, and what are the major powers uh, rather than like the US and China? Thank you so much. These are the two questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Ivan Moshev. Am I
Mo,
pronounced it correctly? How to say?
Moiseyev.
Moiseev. Okay, from where
Yeah,
are you?
it's all right. I guess it's obvious. Actually, I'm from Russia, from the Ural
Ah, okay,
region. So,
okay. Thank you so much. So, we have also from Russia again. Okay. Uh, maybe I will give another chance for the question from the last one. I think from for the session. Yeah, maybe we can open another session later on. From Garin Arifian Muhammad.
Okay, thank you. Well, my name is Karin. I'm from Stockholm University in Sweden. I'm studying Master in Middle Eastern Studies. But thank you for your such an insightful presentation. So you've mentioned that the prison reality is uneven authority, and you also conclude that the future of global justice will depend on who gets to co-author the rules, right? So it's ignite me because I have ever discussion with one of my professor in the human rights course, and he said that the access and the presence of human rights as a written constitutional document is nothing because we can regard it to the US and also New Zealand. Both country has a very different written constitutional document in human rights. But here I want to focus in on what you've explained about who gets to co-author. Then my question is, we can take a look to what happened between war Russia and Ukraine and also Iran, also US, Palestine, and also Israel. So do you think that the existence of like ICC, ICG, and also UN is nothing because you say that the global justice no focusing on who gets to co-author rules? And also my second question is, do you agree that this kind of institution will intervene the conflict or the war as long as it's aligned with their principle? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Garin Arifian Muhammad. So I think, do you still want to receive another question, Mr. Maula, or maybe answer it
Okay, I
first?
think I think I need to respond it first.
Oh, okay,
There
okay.
are
Thank
already three questions, right? Okay. First I will address the question of Miss Safira, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, sorry, Raisha, Miss Raisha.
Raisha.
Yeah.
Raisha.
Sorry. Okay. Okay, Miss Raisha, you asked whether the hedging strategy, let's say the hedging strategy that executed by Indonesia in this in astropolitical sector, whether it can be considered as just a response of the weak country to survive the let's say major power politics, right? Well, I did not deny that, but even in the like disadvantaged situation, like we are not as strong as maybe as China, as the US, as Russia, as also India. When we talk about space technology, why don't we cooperate like with China and also with the US, who are already proven in the space sectors, but rather we are collaborating with India, for example, in building and developing our new satellites, and also collaborating with Russia in uh, building Biak spaceport, which is predicted that it could be used to launch rocket and satellites by next year. Even in the disadvantaged situation, we can still manage our strategic autonomy. We This is what I call as negotiated independency. Yes, we are dependent with another country. We are dependent with bigger country technology, like stronger country technology, but we have the possibility. We have the ability to choose to which country we are going to depend ourselves. The question rise, why India and Russia? Why is it not China and United States? Okay, United States need let's say the United States require us to obey their very strict rules regarding technology transfer, in which it is impossible for us to get the most recent US technology, and also we have to obey other very strict rules from the USA. And in China, if I'm not mistaken, the consideration is because we still have like geopolitical potential of geopolitical dispute in North Natuna Sea, or what they say as South China Sea. So politically, it's not quite safe to choose China and the US in this case, and it is not beneficial for us to choose US, and it is not politically beneficial for us to choose China either. So in this case, India and Russia becomes more visible partner in developing our space technology, and also space for development in India. So yeah, my argument is still the same. Even in a disadvantaged situation as middle power country, we still have to choose. We still have to negotiate our dependence. We have to depend to the most politically and economically and maybe diplomatically beneficial countries compared to the others. So that's my answer to Miss Shafira.
Raisha.
Raisha, sorry. My
Okay.
bad. Miss Raisha,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can continue to the other questions, Mas
Okay,
Maula.
Okay, I note that the second question of Mr. Ivan is about, is it possible if space becomes new platform for ini ya, for arm race ya, if I'm not mistaken. But so what is the first question again?
Mr. Moula, actually, my first question was about how do you assess the risks and threats of the Golden Dome project of the US, as specified according to their national strategy and defense national strategy? So, what are the risks and threats?
Golden Dome project,
yeah.
right?
Golden Dome project in US. I think it's kind
Okay.
of related with the question about the arm race actually.
Yeah, basically the questions complement each other. So, and
Okay. Okay. Okay, let me begin. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, the Golden Dome project is the US ambitious programs that they want to cover the entire US territory and their allies with ICBM, right? Okay, and what are the risks? Okay, yeah, it is related to the arm race in the outer space. Yes, it is possible, and I think almost all of the major power countries, the powerful countries, they've already developed, like before we talk about ICBM and the nuclear weapons, they already built anti-satellite weapons. They have capability to launch a missile from the surface and to strike the satellites. And it is quite serious problems in astropolitical realm as well, because it can trigger, you say, arm race in the space. But when we talk about space weaponization in broader perspective, it is not only limited to the anti-satellites weapon, and also when we talk about Golden Dome project by the US, in which they seek to weaponize all their territory with ICBM, and also um, their sorry their alliance, their alliance with ICBM. It is part of the risk, but the broader risk itself is way more, like, maybe it's not as bombastic as this one, but when we talk about space weaponization, the sabotage of telecommunication infrastructure, and also the disruption of satellites, it could be affected to maybe similar catastrophe, not necessarily physically similar, but it could also create quite serious disruption as well. But when we talk about Golden Dome, yeah, the logic that comes into mind is similar logic as the Cold War, the logic of deterrence, in which it creates uncertainty, it creates distrust, it creates insecurity for other countries, that, you know, when when a country owns, let's say, nuclear weapon, space weapon, other countries who are against or not in the same side with this country will perceive it like as a threat, right? That logic happen, and yeah, the the distrust between countries can be going bigger and bigger. That's my opinion. But I think I need to research more about the Golden Dome. Thank you very much for the question, Ivan.
Okay, thank you so much, Mas Maula. Maybe we can move to the next question from Mr. Arifian.
Okay, for Mr. Arivian, if I'm not mistaken, your question is about the co-authorship of norms, and how about like ICC and ICJ? Are they still relevant or not, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, is that correct?
Okay. So I will go with ICC and ICJ first. ICC in particular, like yeah, few days or few months ago, I did open the website of the ICC, and turns out they've already like how to say it, like put some war criminals and international criminals to the court, but there are like 30 peoples, but sadly, all of them are African, are from African countries. None of people that ever been brought to the ICC court is from strong country. Well, if you ask about is it still relevant? Well, it's hard to say, but in my opinion, in my personal opinion, I don't see that ICC have have pretty much relevant in this kind of in nowadays situation, because there is popular opinion that international law is the weapon of the weak, in which weak states, to at least middle power states, they have no other option than obey to the international law. But for the stronger countries, like, yeah, you name it, ICC has been released an order to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu and also Russia's Vladimir Putin. But yeah, how actually they're gonna do it? They have no means to do it at all. They have no troops, and these countries like Israel and Russia, they are they are very strong. They cannot like they cannot just give Netanyahu or Putin to ICC. It's not going to be happen. So there is I argue that there is the serious reformation in our international law needs to be made. And if we talk specifically about the astropolitics, especially the main notion that are popular in the global north, um, in the powerful countries, is that astropolitics is perceived as a new geopolitical high ground, in which it is perceived as a space, a place that if they manage to control it, they will get the geopolitical advantage over the other. However, it is unequal and it is an injustice for the other countries who does not possess similar ability to them. It is happen in many sectors in which a weaker country, a smaller country like in the global south, are often they have to get the consequences for everything that they did not even decide. It is we have to reform that. And actually, I'm writing. I've already submitted an article in which I offer local wisdom from Indonesia. Actually, to be specific, Javanese perspective in how the astropolitical realm need to be governed. But it is very normative, but I think it can offer like alternative view. My main thesis is astropolitics, or it can be applied in other sector as well. It needs not to see as a arena of competition, but we have to see it as integral part of our lives. We have to see it as yeah, you have heard about common heritage of humankind. We have to realize that we have to act as a single one entity, and we have to govern it together. And whenever there are differences, we have to resolve it together as well. That's the main thesis I suggest in that in that article. Maybe that's answer I can offer to you,
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you
Garin.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Mas Maula. Um, I think it seems that we have a lot of questions here, so maybe let's give another chance for Miss Inayatul Fitri.
Thank you very much, sir. This is such an interesting lecture. So allow me to introduce myself. I'm Inaya. I'm currently in Bekasi. So my question is, perhaps it's related to Indonesia's strategic and defense. I personally have research interests in defense and foreign policy. Do you think that what we have today, our national security interests or national interests per se, when it comes to defense or military, it's still related to either terrorisms, narcotics, and also the issue of separatisms. And perhaps it is not so, I would say, not so open towards digital space. No, we have AI and etc. Do you think that with all of this, I think from your perspective that you mentioned before about astropolitics, do you think that should Indonesia start to consider how to see the problem from the astropolitics dimensions rather than geopolitics, or even, should I say, for today's current issues that we have problems with mining, etc.? Do you think that we should adopt that for our national defense policy? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miss Inayatul Fitri. And we have another one from Mr. Azel Bima Rajasa.
Thank you. My name is Azel, and I'm from Jakarta. My question is regarding the last slide about the possible future of fragmentation. There is managed pluralism, competitive blocks, normative breakdown, and inclusive renewal. I would like to ask for the opinion. What would be best for Indonesia's interest to pursue in those fragmentation? So, like, what kind of future or type of fragmentation that Indonesia would benefit the most and the least? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Azel. I think before we move into the chat box questions, I think maybe we can answer the question from Miss Inayatul Fitri and Mr. Azel first. Mas Maula.
Okay, thank you, Mas Fendi. I will address Miss Inayatul Fitri first. Is Indonesia considering to move to astropolitical approach to like uh, to address our security issue, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yes, actually discussion about it has already there, as the satellite technology, the satellite system can be used to monitor our ocean, in which it can be used to map the illegal fishing, the activity of illegal fishers, and also the piracy. And if we check the website of International Maritime Bureau, if I'm not mistaken, although it is not Indonesian owned, it is international organization, they have a map, real-time map, that show the satellite pictures that show where the piracy mostly happens in all the world oceans. Well, Indonesia have to use this kind of technology as well, and the discussion is already there. But until this time, until now, we haven't owned the technology yet. Yes, we are operating like 9 satellites, but I don't think that even one of these 9 satellites is used for this kind of could be effectively used in this kind of purpose. Many of them are still focused in the communication sectors. They only use for providing internet connection across our archipelago, but we still don't have enough satellites to monitor all of our territory without delay, as stated by BMKG. At least we need 9 satellites dedicated for that activity. But in practice, we also have 9 satellites with different purposes. So the discussion is present, but we are just not there already. But yeah, we need to move toward that direction. I think that's my answer for
Okay, thank you so much,
Miss
Maula.
Inayatul.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we can move to the next questions from Mr. Azel.
Okay, from Mr. Azel, for Mr. Azel, I think, well, in my personal opinion, the best option, the best possible. Well, it is kind of difficult to say, but I think managed pluralism is good. Well, it's kind of status quo. It's still quite similar to today's situation, but I think if the pluralism still can be managed, I think everything is going to be okay. Like we still have room to decide to which country or to which actor we have to rely on, or we have to depend, or to whom we have to transfer their technology to us. I think it is still, better option than the others. I think the worst possible feature is competitive blocks, because it will put our bebas active in challenge once again, right? I think that's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you so much, Mas Maula. I think it is wisely we move into the chat box because we have several questions there and it's quite lively over there. I don't know which one we should start since we have very limited time, but I think the question from, let me read it for you, yeah? The question from Johanna Avila Pigo. Hello, I have a question about countries' participation in astropolitics. How can we engage in the important decision when we don't have the resources or infrastructure to decision makers? Yeah, I think that's very related question from Johanna Avila Pigot. Okay.
Well, yeah, ideally we have to be involved in every decision that will affect our daily life. But practically, sadly, we are not there yet.
Are you still
Third
there?
world country, just like us,
Okay,
to
you just
create
okay.
important
Please
decision.
go ahead.
Okay, Mas. Am I audible?
Yeah. Loud and clear now.
Okay. So yeah, that's my opinion. Ideally, third world countries just like us have to be involved in every decision-making process that will affect our lives, our daily lives. But practically, we're just not there yet, right? And I think it is still a long way to go to reform that systems, because in the international politics we know about strategic egoism. No major powers would allow their ability or their authority to be reduced just to say just to like give smaller countries opportunity to decide their future. I think it's still a long way to go, but ideally, yes. I think that's my response, Wendy.
Okay, thank you so much, Mas Maula. Yeah, that's quite debatable about that issue, I think. And then the other one, I think is quite related, but into more technical aspect. It is from, I'm sorry if I pronounce the name in not the correct way, Ron Ng Jing Ye. So let me read it. Hi, Mr. Maula. Thank you for insightful presentation. Just a question here. If powerful countries and companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are already creating their own rules for space, is it still possible to build a fair global system that everyone can agree on?
Okay, it's kind of, well, it is kind of difficult question because if you argue that SpaceX and Blue Origins are already creating their own rules for space, well, I'm not sure which rule is it, but if the question is if the companies like SpaceX and Blue Origins are already able to limit states' strategic autonomy, yes, it's already happened, like the SpaceX in Ukraine when Elon Musk personally denied Ukrainian request to use SpaceX to help them to attack Russian fleet in Sevastopol. And then it is possible to build a fair global system that everyone can agree on. I think ideally, yes, but again, we are not there yet. Our system, our international system nowadays is not working that way. Not yet. Again, I said, when there is already one or two actors that already like controlling that space, already there, already possess the control, it is rarely that they want to share it with other emerging actors. For example, when if we talk about companies, let's say the space sectors already controlled by SpaceX and Blue Origin. When emerging actors, emerging companies appear, maybe they will do everything they could to deter these emerging companies from growing bigger than them. I think it's just difficult to create fairness in this situation. I think that's my response, Wendy.
Okay, thank you so much, Mas Maula. So, okay. So I hope those answer all of the questions. And then, ladies and gentlemen, looking at the time, unfortunately, we have reached the end of our allocated time for this Q&A sessions. And I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to all the participants for your active engagement and the provoking question you brought to the floor today. And above all, a tremendous thank you to our esteemed speaker, Mas Maula Hudaya, for sharing his profound expertise with us, your insight into how astropolitics and technological capabilities, I think, are reshaping the very foundation of global justice that have certainly given us a fresh and critical perspective to carry forward in this summer course. And before we officially close the session, I invited everyone to give a virtual round of applause to Mas Maula. Thank you so much, Mas Maula.
Thank
So
you very
I
much,
think,
Mas Wendy and everyone.
yeah. So before we move on, maybe thank you once again, Mas Maula. Okay. Oh, the time's up. Okay. So I think thank you once again, Mas Maula, and thank you to everyone for your participation. I think I give back this session to the committee. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maula Hudaya, SHUP in MA, and also our respected moderator for leading such an insightful panel discussion.
Yes, of course, the material was truly enlightening and combined with the engaging presentation, of course. I believe all of us has gained many new perspective and deeper insight into global justice at a crossroad, power, norms, and the future of international law.
I know, right? It was really an inspiring discussion. And just a quick reminder for those who have not yet completed today's attendance, please remember to do so through the link shared in the Zoom chat or the official WhatsApp group.
Well then, before we continue to the next agenda, let's take a moment for a documentation session. For everyone, kindly turn on your cameras and give us your brightest smile. Are you ready, everyone?
Okay, can we see everyone's beautiful faces? Yeah.
Okay, counting down, 3, 2, 1, smile.
Strike the pose, everybody. 3, 2, 1. Is that enough? One more time, maybe?
Okay, 3, 2, 1, smile.
Okay, I think that's more than enough. Great, thank you, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed our first panel discussion and found it as insightful as we did.
Okay, of course. Well then, let's continue to our second panel discussion. Our second panel discussion is titled Politics and Condemnation on International Crimes and will be delivered by our distinguished speaker, Dr. Muhammad Rashidin from Universitas Diponegoro.
To guide us through this discussion, we are delighted to welcome back our moderator, Mr. Fendi Eko Wahyudi, SIP MHUPIN.
Okay, thank you so much, the committee. I thought we are going to have just a short moment of break, but right away we continue to another session. So I think welcome back then as we continue to the this session. It is still wonderful to see everyone still logged in and highly energized for our next session. I think it is more and more participants attending this session. So once again, before we hand over to our next presenter, just a quick reminder to please keep your microphone muted during the session and feel free to keep your cameras turned on to maintain our interactive virtual environment if it is possible. And then in this session, we will be shifting our focus to highly topical issues in contemporary international relations. So the presentation is titled Why States Do or Do Not Condemn, a narrative analysis of Indonesia's response to the war in Gaza 2023 and Ukraine 2022. So this lecture will offer a fascinating look at how international condemnation functions not just as a standard diplomatic tool, but as an expression of a state's narrative identity on the global stage. So hopefully by analyzing these two critical case studies, and then we try to understand how Indonesia responds to the conflict of Gaza and Ukraine, this session hopefully will unpack how foreign policy choices are deeply intertwined with identity construction and the pursuit of ontological security. So I would like to introduce to all of you the speakers. So to guide us through this analysis, we are delighted to welcome an expert whose extensive research heavily map onto these very questions. Please welcome Dr. Muhammad Rashidin, MA. So Dr. Rashidin is prominent lecturer in the Department of International Relations at Universitas Diponegoro. He completed his bachelor degree in international relations at Universitas Jember in Indonesia, and then also earned his doctoral degree in Universitas Gajah Mada. So here are a few notable highlights of his professional background. So he teach foundational and advanced course, including international relation theory in Universitas Diponegoro, and then share with me also teaching with the research methodology and academic writing. And Dr. Rashidin also prolific researcher and author, having published numerous books and articles. And then one, I think that maybe we need to read about the foreign policy of Indonesia in the perspective of Japanese culture. And then his scientific publication extensively explore Indonesian foreign policy national identity myths and middle powermanship, including deep dive into Indonesia diplomatic positioning regarding global issues and regional norms. And maybe some of you maybe already know him. He is also well known maybe for me as Alexander Wen of Indonesia, because yeah, he talked more about constructivism. So good afternoon, also good evening, or maybe good night. We have many participants around the globe here. Dr. Rashidin, thank you so much for joining us today to share your valuable insight. So who are you?
Thank you, Mas Wendy. I'm very good.
Okay, so I think without further ado, the floor and the screens are yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mas Fendi, for your kind introduction. I very appreciate for staying until this section. So in this section, I would like to give kind of a short lecture about the phenomenon of condemnation in international relations. This topic is important for us, especially for IR scholars, IR students, to understand how countries use verbal instrument in responding international crisis. So the title of my lecture, I'm sorry, can somebody share screen of my PPT?
Okay, maybe the committee can help to share the screen for the presentation or the material that already prepared by Dr. Rashidin.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, can
So
you
the
make it
title,
full screen? Excuse me, I'm sorry.
yeah, please.
Okay, please go ahead, Dr.
All right. So this is the title of my lecture today. The title is "Why States Do or Not Do Not Condemn: A Narrative Analysis of Indonesia's Response to the War in Gaza, 2023, and Ukraine 2022." The question is, why do I choose Indonesia as a case study? The answer is quite simple. Aside from my own expertise on Indonesia's foreign policy, this topic is interesting due to Indonesia's foreign policy characteristic that is characterized by ambivalent behavior in international politics. Next, please. This lecture will be divided into several sub-themes. I will begin with international response to current crisis, specifically war in Gaza and US military action against Venezuela. Then the second section, I will sketch in brief about existing studies on this issue in IR, especially what scholars have done and what have still to do about this topic. The next section focuses on the concept of narrative identity in IR. This concept, I think, is quite important for us to understand how states construct their identities on the global stage. It's also important to discuss about the method I use in this lecture to analyze the issue of international condemnation. I'm going to show you about what narrative analysis is and how to conduct narrative analysis in IR research. The next section is the detail analysis of two case studies which compare the contrasting response of Indonesia to the war in Gaza and Russia invasion to Ukraine. And the last section is conclusion. Next, please. All right, now I will begin my lecture with the phenomenon of international condemnation on the war in Gaza and US invasion to Venezuela. As we already know, states often react to international crisis with various response. For example, following Israel invasion to Gaza, some countries support Israel aggressive behavior, while other countries, including Indonesia, showed a different policy by condemning Israel brutality in Gaza. Interestingly, countries such as Iran, Yemen, and Sudan support Hamas. In the case of U.S. military intervention to Venezuela, international community also show different reactions. Some U.S. allies, especially in Europe, as you can see on the screen, condemn the U.S. intervention. And something that is interesting is that unlike its response to Israel's war in Gaza, Indonesia did not condemn U.S. intervention in Venezuela. And this paradox is intriguing and demands for explanation. And this lecture will offer an explanation why Indonesia chose this decision. Next, please. So the basic question is, why do states condemn? Three dominant perspectives in IR offers different explanations on the driving force behind this policy. Realists, for example, tend to emphasize on interest-driven policy, and from a realist point of view, condemnation is primarily driven by national interests, either to preserve states' national security or maintaining a good relationship with a targeted country. Conversely, liberals believe that condemnation is a normative action driven by states' commitment to international law. So in this logic, from liberal perspective, condemnation is a kind of normative action driven by a state's commitment to punish toward who violate international law. And the third perspective, constructivism, stresses more on ideational elements rather than material interests or commitment to international law, like liberalists argued. From constructivism, states condemnation can be explained using the concept of identity. Using this logic, condemnation functions as an instrument of state's identity projection. So from a constructivist point of view, states condemn simply because they want to build an image or identity toward the international community. So what's the problem with the existing literature on this issue? When studying international condemnation, scholars in IR focus on the effectiveness of the policy in changing targeted countries. They put heavily on how to measure effectiveness of this policy to change target countries' policy. In this regard, existing literature is divided into three perspectives or three strands. The first perspective is those who argue that condemnation is effective in transforming targeted states policy. For example, Benjamin Crane, in his article, found that the strategy of naming and shaming is very effective in transforming foreign policy of perpetrators, because according to Crane, it affects a state's reputation in the global arena. On the contrary, some scholars disagree with this perspective. They argue that the strategy, I mean condemnation, is ineffective because in an anarchic international system, there is no higher authority to impose coercive decision upon states. For example, Hafner Burton argued that international condemnation is ineffective simply because international organizations like the UN lacks of legitimacy and often dominated by strong powers who are also as perpetrators of international norms. But beyond these perspectives, there is one perspective that argue that the efficacy of condemnation is conditional. Using this logic, condemnation is effective because there is the conditioning variable that make this strategy could result in transformation in state policy. So from this perspective, international condemnation is effective when there are some intervening variable that make condemnation could result in transformation in state policy. Next, please. So what is left? I mean, what's previous studies overlook or neglect in the debate on international condemnation in international relations literature? I argue that there have not been research on the impact of condemnation on states. I mean, states who are condemning other nation, not targeted country, but states who are condemning other countries. Specifically, how do countries utilize condemnation as an instrument of state identity projection as proposed by constructivists? My analysis will fill this gap. Next, please. Before we analyze Indonesia's case studies, first I will explain the concept of narrative identity. This concept is defined as the internalized and evolving story of the self, which provides a sense of unity, purpose, and meaning in life. Who we are and what we want cannot be separated from the stories we tell to others. Thus, as Honeland, 2010, in his article, argued that stories are more than just mirrors of reality. They actively shape who we are. We create stories not only to describe events, for example, or realities around us, but rather stories are instrument of identity construction. For example, when we tell our life experience to others, either successes, stories, or values, we are constructing our identity. Next, please. So the question is, how do we study condemnation using the concept of narrative identity? The answer is we need a different method of analysis than traditional qualitative methods, such as content analysis or discourse analysis. This method, maybe some of you unfamiliar. This method is called narrative analysis. International relations scholars or students may be unfamiliar with this term because this method is actually borrowed from literature in analyzing text, in analyzing stories. So a narrative consists of three elements, namely text, story, and fabula. Text is the medium of narratives. In other words, it is an instrument through which a storyteller tells a story. People may use images, symbols, sounds, and others. Story is the content of a story itself. It contains specific meanings that a storyteller tells. Lastly, the fabula. The fabula is a plot of the story. It contains a storyline or logical sequence of how a storyteller tells his story. There are three steps in analyzing narratives. As you can see on the screen, there are three steps in analyzing a story. The first step is identifying the storyline. In this step, we should summarize the whole text into a concise narrative. In the context of storyline is another term for synopsis, right? And the second step is identifying genre, defined as the category of story, whether it is a kind of tragedy or epic or comedy or irony. And finally, the researcher, or if we want to analyze a narrative, we should infer meaning of the story. We should formulate a logical argument based on previous two steps analysis. Next, please. Now we move to the focus of this lecture, that is analyzing Indonesia's response to war in Gaza 2023 and Ukraine 2022. As you can see on the screen, this is a text read by former Indonesia's Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi at the ICJ following the brutal invasion of Israel in Gaza. Maybe you can read it for a moment. All right, next slide, please. Now, we try to analyze this text using 3 steps of narrative analysis, as I explained previously. The first step is identifying the storyline. Here's this summary of Marsudi's text regarding Indonesia's position in the war in Gaza. Please read it carefully. This is a kind of summary of previous text. All right, next slide, please. So the storyline consists of 2 primary elements. First, about Israel's illegal occupation in Gaza, and the second one is about Israel's unwillingness to obey international law. And after we summary the whole text into a concise narrative, the second step is identifying the genre. It is easy to categorize Marsudi's text as a tragedy, since she emphasizes on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, especially regarding Palestinian people. This text also depicts who the protagonist is and who the antagonist is. From Indonesian perspective, the protagonist is the Palestinian people, while the antagonist is Israel as perpetrator. Indonesia also frames the war as the struggle for liberation, meaning that it represents Palestine's struggle to free itself from Israel's colonialism. Next slide, please. The last step to analyze a narrative is formulating an inference. From the text above, we can make an inference that the illegal Israeli occupation on Palestine results in the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. As a consequence, Indonesia suggests that in order to stop humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, Israel's unlawful occupation and its atrocities must stop, and neither should it be normalized nor recognized. Thus, by telling this, Indonesia is trying to project its identity characterized by anti-colonialism. As you may already know, that Indonesia's constitution stated very clearly at the very beginning of its constitution that colonialism must be eradicated from the world. That is a reflection of Indonesia's traditional identity. Next slide, please. What does it mean? It means that it projects Indonesia's self-image in the eyes of the international community that by condemning Israel's violation of international law, Indonesia regards Palestine as a victim, and this also reflects Indonesia's advocate for a two-state, Indonesia's aspiration for two-state solution that acknowledge Palestinian statehood. I think it is not something that's strange for us, especially in Indonesia, because we are very familiar with this assertion. Next slide, please. Now we move on to the second case study, which focuses on Indonesia's response to Russia's invasion to Ukraine. As you can see on the screen, this is a formal statement released by the Indonesian government, Indonesian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, following Russia's invasion to Ukraine in 2022. Please read it carefully. There are 5 statements released by the Indonesian government. Next slide, please. Now we try to analyze this text using a narrative method. Just like previous analysis, first of all, we need to identify its storyline. The construction of the storyline is as follows. You can read this summary carefully. The most important thing regarding this text, comparing to Indonesia's text regarding Israel, is the absence of condemnation from the Indonesian government. Instead of using sharp statements, condemn, etc., something like that, Indonesia uses a more polite languages. For example, it does not mention Russia as a perpetrator. Contrast to previous statement in which Indonesia frequently refers Israel as perpetrator of international law. So I think it's a quite different text, quite different narrative comparing to Indonesia's response to war in Gaza. Next slide, please. Now we move on to the second step, that is identifying this genre. Indonesia's response to Russia's invasion to Ukraine can be categorized simply as an irony than tragedy. The primary reason is that it expresses a pessimistic mood, as exemplified by the statement, the attack also poses a great danger to the safety of the people and threatens, and so on and so forth. Indonesia's statement also shows its neutrality rather than taking side, and the absence of revering Russia as a perpetrator is intentional. It is intended to prevent political bias, and it is intended to maintain a good relationship with Russia. So I think it is a very contrasting view of Indonesia regarding 2 international crises that happened in 2023 and 2022. The next slide, please. Finally, the third step, the final step in analyzing narrative is that we have to formulate an inference regarding Indonesia's narrative on Russia's attack in Ukraine. From previous analysis, we can make an inference. We can conclude that Indonesia does not support the use of force in international relations. From Indonesia's perspective, the use of force would create a humanitarian crisis and destabilize international order. Another point is that Indonesia highlights the absence of the UN Security Council in this conflict. According to Indonesia, the absence of the United Nations Security Council would worsen the situation. Next slide, please. So what does it mean? This analysis implies several things. First, Indonesia's rejection to mention Russia in its statement implies that it adopts diplomatic prudence. This strategy is intended to prevent potential diplomatic risk that could arise from these statements. Second, Indonesia underscores the importance of norms, primarily non-use of force in managing international conflicts. This principle reflects Indonesia's traditional self-image as a peacemaker. And this identity also clearly stated in Indonesia's constitution, especially in the fourth paragraph of Indonesia's constitution, that Indonesia will energetically contribute to world peace. So this reflects Indonesia's traditional identity as a peacemaker. The third one, it also has to do with shared identity between Indonesia and Russia. So Indonesia uses polite languages in order to maintain a good relationship with Russia. As we already know that the two countries has a very good relationship, especially in terms of economy. For example, Russia is one of largest trading partner for Indonesia, although it is not the largest trading partner, but it's very important for Indonesia to fulfill domestic needs. For example, Indonesian people are very love to consume noodle, and many Indonesian commodities are coming from Russia. And in terms of military, Russia is one of the biggest supplier of for Indonesian military force, or TNI, especially to modernize its alutsista, or primary weapon system. The Sukhoi and some other weaponry system are coming from Russia. Next slide, please. So it could be concluded that international condemnation is not merely an expression of commitment to international law, as liberals argue, or an instrument of national interest, as realists argue. But international condemnation also an instrument of identity construction at the global stage, as constructivists argue. So this argument confirms constructivist assumption about the role of condemnation in international relations that have been neglected by many scholars on this topic. So this argument implies that condemnation has to do with states' ontological security. The concept of ontological security was coined by Brian Steele and developed by scholars like Jennifer Mitson, who define the term as a state's concern about their identity rather than their physical security. This is not to say that the physical security is not important as realist arguments. Instead, states also try their best to preserve their identity, because without identity there are no interest, and without interest there are no meaningful behaviors. So in order to preserve their sense of self, states should reproduce their identity in many occasions. And international crises like war in Gaza, or war in the Ukraine, or US invasion to Venezuela provides best moments for states to communicate who they are and what they want in the eyes of the international community. So this is the end of my lecture. Thanks for your attention. I hope my ideas could trigger your curiosity regarding the practice of condemnation in international relations. Now, I'd like to turn the time back over to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin, for such an engaging and theoretical rich presentation. It is truly maybe eye-opening to see how diplomatic response, like condemnation or the strategic omniscience of it, serve as mirror for a nation core identity. So balancing anti-colonial commitment in one arena with strategic neutrality and a peacemaker persona in another. So now we will open the floor for the Q&A session. Same like the previous session, you are welcome to participate in two ways. First, to ask directly, please use the raise hand feature. And once called upon, unmute your microphone, introduce yourself, and state your question clearly. And then the other one, ask via chat box. So feel free to type your question directly into the chat box along with your name and institution, and I will read it aloud for Dr. Rashidin to address. So the floor is now open for your question and comments. Is there anyone who want to ask directly to Dr. Rashidin? Or maybe we can move first into the already, okay. Okay. Mr. Garin, okay. Please, we
Okay.
give for Mr. Garin, yeah.
Thank you very much for the insightful.
Okay, maybe the committee can help us to mute it, the other participants. The committee. Okay.
Well, let me continue. So thank you for Mr. Muhammad Rashidin for an insightful lecture. So I'm Karin. I'm studying Middle Eastern Studies at Stockholm University in Sweden. Actually, I'm truly interested with what you've explained it before, that you say condemnation becomes identity construction, because identity is such a one of topic that we always talk about in my area. So my question is about, if you say that condemnation then becomes an identity construction, so is there any connection or is there any wire relation within the social agency? Because, for instance, like the US, they have a war with Iran because they said that they want to help to the Iranian people to reach the liberation. So do you think that social agency has a place to the identity construction, because maybe they think this kind of war happen, they believe that that kind of what is that principle is true because they want to reach the liberation, for instance. So thank you, that's my question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garin. Okay, is there another one who want to ask the question directly to Dr. Rashidin? Or maybe we can move to the chat first. There are several questions already. Okay. Okay. From Mr. Zohaib Hassan Sain from Pakistan. So there are two questions here. How should Indonesia respond to international crimes while maintaining good relation with other countries? And then the second one, what role can Indonesia play encouraging accountability for international crimes through international cooperation? And there are some comments from Mr. Garin once again about the method. It seemed like CDA, critical discourse analysis. Is it the same one by Norman Fairclough or another perspective? And then we have also from Muhammad Cesar Valentino from Undip, from Faculty of Law. The US continues supporting Israel despite Indonesia's diplomatic effort. Should Indonesia maintain its non-aligned approach and continue engaging with US? Or should it take a firmer stance against the US to uphold its support for Palestine? Okay, maybe we can discuss about those questions first. What is
Right.
your take on that?
Well, thank you for the questions. Some question is very interesting, and there are two questions from Mas Karin, right? The first about the methods. What is the difference between critical discourse analysis and narrative method? Is very different. CDA focus on to unpack the hidden meaning, hidden power relations behind the text. That's why it's called a critical discourse analysis. While narrative analysis is borrowed from literature, and it is used for analyzing stories. This is a very simple method of analysis by focusing only on the plot, on the character of the text, whether it is a kind of tragedy or epic, romance, irony, and etc. So there is a huge difference between these two methods, I think. And the second question relates to the agency of countries to create to construct identity. Yes, based on a constructivist point of view, identity of a country is socially constructed. This is not a given entity, but rather it is constructed through times. And the role of society, the role of elites play a significant in constructing the concept of a state self, and they define who we are again, define or they build a barrier or a differentiation or subject positioning between us versus them. So in the case you mentioned about the relationship between the US and Iran, I think US construct its identity as a liberator, right? Quote unquote, as a liberator of Iranian people. The US define itself based on their identity as a promoter of human rights, as a promoter of a democracy. So they construct their identity against Iranian government that construct their identity very antagonistic with the US. So again, the role of agency, state agency or public agency, it's very important in constructing or defining who states is and what it's one in international relations. The second questions is about the ambivalence characteristic of Indonesia's foreign policy. Yeah, as I said before, Indonesia's foreign policy is characterized by its ambivalence. In one hand, Indonesia support Palestinian people, and they condemn Israel brutality in Gaza. But at the same time, Indonesia did not dare to refer Russia or to mention the name of Russia in its statement following the invasion in Ukraine. And this ambivalence is not an accidental. It is intentional, and it is strategic because from international relations perspective, middle powers like Indonesia should maintain their good relationship with the big one, in the sense Russia, because Indonesia is very dependent on Russia's economy and military. Indonesia has disparity, a very large disparity between the gap between Indonesia military capability and Russia is very large, so very wide, and so that's why Indonesia should choose more polite languages than Indonesia's use in the case of Israel's invasion. So simply this ambivalence is not accidental, it is intentional. The third question is about, should Indonesia maintain its non-aligned and engage closely to the US? My suggestion is no. Indonesia should maintain its traditional foreign policy principle, namely free and active, or bebas active principle. It implies that Indonesia should stay away from great powers rivalry. Indonesia should not align, should not build alliance with the US, either with US or China or Russia or any powers. Indonesia should maintain its strategic autonomy using Mas Maula previous presentation. I think the strategic autonomy would preserve, would guarantee Indonesia's national interests rather than taking side to one of great powers. I think that's all, Mas Fendi.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rashidin. We have another questions in chat box, but I think we should give more privilege for the one who raised up already, to Miss Nadia Magdalena.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wendy. Ms. Rashid, you concluded that condemnation is a mechanism for states to achieve ontological security and maintain a consistent self-identity. However, your case studies show that Indonesia vehemently condemns the perpetrator, Israel, in the Gaza conflict, while strategically avoiding naming the perpetrator, Russia, in the Ukraine conflict under the guise of diplomatical prudence. Doesn't this stark contrast suggest that Indonesia's identity is highly inconsistent and ultimately driven by classic realist material interest, such as preserving military and economic ties with Russia, rather than a stable internalized narrative? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. From Miss Nadia Magdalena. You want to answer it first, or take another question from the chat box?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, maybe, okay, thank you so much for Ms. Magdalena. And then maybe we can read from another question from the chat box. It is once again from Rafiq Al Farouk. Could the non-state actors impact the condemnation stance taken by one country, and how effective will it be? So it is about the role of non-state actors. And then we have also from Mr. Azel Bimarajasa. Hello, I would like to ask, do you think that condemnation can be weaponized by certain state to attack other states' identity? Okay, maybe these three questions first before we move to another questions. What is your take on that, Dr. Rashidin?
From Mrs. Nadia Magdalena, can you repeat again your question?
Okay. Do you still there, Miss Nadia Magdalena?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, in your case study shows that Indonesia vehemently condemns the perpetrator, Israel, in the Gaza conflict, while strategically avoiding naming the perpetrator, Russia, in the Ukraine conflict. But doesn't this stark contrast suggest that Indonesia identity is highly inconsistent and ultimately different by the classic realist material interest?
Right.
Okay. So maybe it's a counter argument from realist perspective, yeah? Okay. So, yeah, what is your takes on those questions, Dr. Rashid?
Right. I'm gonna answer Mr. Nadia's question first about whether or not Indonesia's identity is inconsistent. The term inconsistent, I think, is not right. The precise term is ambivalence. So ambivalence is different with inconsistent. basically, in international relations, states like Indonesia, especially middle powers and some intermediate countries, should maintain their national interests, right, in an anarchic international system. So they use various identities in order to adapt their foreign policy in certain contexts. So in the context of Israel's invasion to Gaza, Indonesia dare to mention Israel as a perpetrator simply because Indonesia still has no relationship with Israel diplomatically, right? So I think this policy is driven by Indonesia's commitment to take side with Palestinian people, because it also stated very clearly in Indonesia's constitution that Indonesia should fight against colonialism. And what Israel has done in Gaza is categorized from Indonesian perspective as a colonialism itself. So Indonesia should fight against this kind of colonialism. On the other case, in the case of Russia's invasion to Ukraine, is very quick. It's quite different with Israel's invasion, right? Indonesia has a strong relationship with Russia on one hand, and the other hand, from realist perspective, Russia is quite bigger, is much bigger than Indonesia, both economically and militarily. So from realist logic, from realist point of view, Indonesia should not have to mention the name of Russia as or labeling Russia as a perpetrator, because it should maintain the good relationship between both countries. I think that's why Indonesia employs two different identities. This is not inconsistent, but Indonesia should, I call it balance of identity hypothesis. It describes when a state should play their identities smartly in certain contexts. In one context, they use one identity, and the other context they use another identity. This is intentional. This is strategic, because states should preserve their national interests in many situations.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Roshidin, for answering this question. And then maybe before move to another question, maybe can you explain more? So actually, do you think that based on that situation, actually, can you think that it's easier to understand it through the realist perspective to see the action of Indonesia than see it as the identity matters? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think in order to understand Indonesia's foreign policy, we can rely on many theoretical perspectives, and realist, I think, is one of the most what do you call it, appropriate theory to explain Indonesia's foreign policy. But my position is not that way. My position is consistent with constructivist premise that foreign policy is also driven by identity rather than material or cost-benefit orientation. As you can see in the case of Indonesia's relation with Russia, or Indonesia's relation with Palestinian, you can see that identity matters the most rather than cost and benefit calculation. That Indonesia is very strong, committed to uphold the struggle of Palestinian people to liberate itself from Israel occupation. And in the case of Russia, instead of despite the fact that Indonesia is very dependent on Russia, Indonesia also use many idioms, many terms like shared historical experience, and it implies that Indonesia and Russia not only strategic partner but also they have long history of relationship. They share identity.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin.
This is not to say that
Yeah, yeah.
realism is not applicable in the case, but I think that aside from realist logic, constructivist also applies to explain this phenomenon.
Okay, thank you so much. And then maybe we can move to another questions about the rule, yeah, the rule of, if I'm not mistaken,
Non-state
the
actor.
rule of non-state actor. Yeah.
The answer is quite simple, that non-state actors is not effective in imposing or in changing perpetrators' policy using condemnation. The explanation is very straightforward, that unlike state actors, non-state actors do not have a coercive power to impose their decision or to impose their aspiration to alter other countries' foreign policy. While state actors is not always effective in changing other countries' policy, non-state actors is totally ineffective. Their power lies not on their military or material capabilities, but on campaign, discourse, and other strategies. But yeah, still they are very ineffective in transforming other countries' policy in terms of violating international norms. And the last question is about how about condemnation as an instrument to attack other countries, right? Yeah, condemnation as a verbal coercive instrument could be an instrument of diplomatic coercion to other countries. Many countries employ condemnation as an instrument to not to punish certain countries or not to project their identities, but merely as an instrument of strategic foreign policy, that is to press to give a pressure to another countries. If we see from the realist perspective, I think this argument is in line with the realist assumption that international condemnation not only function, not only serve as an instrument of identity projection, as I argue, or as an instrument to punish other countries, as liberals argue, but also as an instrument of diplomatic coercion by some countries to their adversaries. It's very logical.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin. So I think we still have several questions, and then maybe we need to give a chance for the one who already raised hand in the from the participant, from Miss Johanna Avila Pico. Miss Johanna Avila Pico, do you still there? Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. First of all, good morning from Panama. The term it's 5 a.m. here right now, so very early. So, Dr. Mohammed, regarding the comparative narrative previously discussed, does neutral positions really exist? And my second question is, should we accept them in times where stronger actions over international law violations must be taken? Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Rashidin, did you get the idea of the questions?
The sound is
okay. So
unclear.
So maybe you can repeat it again once again, Miss Johanna.
Okay.
Miss Pico. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Dr. Mohammed, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. My first question is regarding the comparative narrative previously discussed. Does neutral positions really exist? And my second question is, should we accept them in times where stronger actions over international law violations must be taken?
Okay, so it is about the question about neutrality. Do you think that still exists? Yeah, is that correct, Miss Pigo?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Pigo. Okay. I think we should also to hear from Mr. Ivan Moasif again. Thank you, Mr. Ivan.
Yeah, thank you so much once again for the opportunity to ask direct question to Mr. Rashidin. So, Mr. Rashidin, how do you think? What is the most obvious, strategy of the Indonesia's government towards the current, I would say, Middle East conflict? Does Indonesia implement the same ambivalence pattern, or you could somehow, let's say, deviate it from the approaches regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflict and Palestinian-Israeli conflict? Thank you.
Okay,
You
thank
mean
you so much.
conflict the US conflict between US and Iran currently?
Yeah, US-Israeli against Iran conflict. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, maybe we need to answer these two questions first before we move to the chat box.
All right. Thank you for the questions. The first about Indonesia's neutrality. Does Indonesia's neutrality still exist? The notion of neutrality in contemporary Indonesian foreign policy is very, very problematic because every Indonesian leaders has their own interpretation of Indonesia's neutrality and how its application in international relation. For example, during Jokowi's presidency, Indonesia defined neutrality by relying on China, aligning more with China rather than the US. And during the Jokowi, during the Prabowo, Indonesia is more like it's very personal preference, right? Indonesia is very close with the US and is very surprising, right? When Prabowo moved to the US, and at the same time brought Indonesia into the BRICS, and I think this is very, very surprising. Indonesia's foreign policy during Prabowo's leadership. So the concept of neutrality is largely depends on how Indonesian leaders interpret this term based on their own preferences. That's why Indonesian foreign policy is is characterized by elitist. Right? This is very elitist. Using the concept of Max Weber, Indonesia's foreign policy is characterized by its patrimonialism. So who leads matters. So if you ask me about does neutrality still exist in today's Indonesia's foreign policy, the answer is yes, it exists, at least in the mind of Indonesian leaders. And I think the next Indonesian leaders will have different interpretation of the concept of neutrality in Indonesia's foreign policy. And the second question is about does Indonesia still have ambivalence foreign policy in the case of conflict between the US and Iran? I think we have already noticed that Indonesia's foreign policy toward this conflict is very clear, but unfortunately, Indonesia is not hurt by Iran, especially when Indonesia offered to mediate the conflict. Iran preferred Pakistan to be a mediator rather than Indonesia. This is the evidence that Indonesia's foreign policy under Prabowo Subianto is not really effective in this situation. But with regard to the notion of ambivalence in Indonesia's foreign policy, yes, the answer is yes. Why I answer that the ambivalence does exist in this situation? Because in one hand, Indonesia has become a member of BOP, Board of Peace, led by the US, right? And Israel is there. But at the same time, Indonesia also projecting its identity as a Muslim country. That's why Indonesia supports Iran. Indonesia show its solidarity with Iranian people, but Indonesia does not want to detach from the US. Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto, reluctant to get Indonesia out from the membership of the BAP or BOP. So this evidence proves that Indonesia's foreign policy is still ambivalent in this situation.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin. I hope that answered the question from Ms. Joanna and then Mr. Ivan Masif. It's interestingly, behind Mr. Ivan Masif, we see there's a picture of Vladimir Putin. I hope it's not quite intimidating for us, for Dr. Rashidin to answer the stance between Indonesia and Russia. Okay, so let's we move to the other question in the chat box. We have several questions here. Okay, it's from Anissa Damayanti. Thank you very much for the insight presentation, Dr. Rashidin. The Palestinian issue remains one of the most pressing problems in the Middle East today. On the other hand, Indonesia, as a country that upholds its bebas active or free and active foreign policy and remains committed to the non-aligned movement, has consistently sought to contribute to global peace. Given this context, what would be the most appropriate role for Indonesia in positioning itself regarding the Palestine-Israel conflict, as well as the broader Israel-Iran tension, particularly considering that Indonesia does not maintain formal diplomatic relations with Israel? Thank you. Do you want to answer it right away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is very difficult question, I think. And my answer is that Indonesia now, under Prabowo's leadership, faces dilemma in this situation. Because in one hand, Indonesia is already a member of a Board of Peace led by the US, along with Israel in the board. But at the same time, Indonesia should demonstrate its commitment to take side with the Palestine. And this situation is very, very difficult for the current leadership to choose which is the best way for Indonesia to implement their free and active foreign policy. And I consider what Prabowo has done by bringing Indonesia to the BOP is one of the biggest blunder in Indonesia's history of foreign policy, and that's should not have been done by Prabowo, because I argue that this policy is jeopardize Indonesia's traditional reputation and Indonesia's traditional identity as the strong, as the as a primary actor of anti-colonial power from the global south. So if I was a presidential staff, I would suggest Prabowo Subianto to detach from the West to get Indonesia out from the POP and return to its traditional position to support Palestinian people by supporting two-state solutions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin. And then let's move to another question from Ron Ng Jingye. So just curious, if one country choose not to condemn an issue, how would it shape how others view its identity and values?
Should I respond right away?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, states identity construction is conducted many ways, not only by condemning others. Condemnation is only one of many instruments, one of many instruments to build states' self-image on the global stage. States construct their identity using many instruments. For example, they develop a relationship. Basically, from constructivist perspective, identity is not given, but it is a socially constructed, and identity is not emerged from vacuum. It is emerged from interactions, social interaction with significant others. So states can construct their identity based on how they interact with each other. For example, when Indonesia interact with Malaysia or with the Vietnam or with other countries, Indonesia in that process simultaneously construct their identity. Indonesia define who she is and who others are, right? So condemnation is only one instrument. Other instruments are interactions with each other, where interaction through which states construct their identity. They define the self and others in the situation. And according to constructivist approach, there are three logic of anarchists. The first one, when two states or more define each other as an enemy. For example, US and Iran is under enemy, right? They perceive each other as an enemy. And the second one is how states define each other as a rivalry rather than enemy. For example, the US and China. US perceive China not as enemy, but as rival. By the same token, China also perceive the US as its rival rather than its enemy. So they are in the rivalry interaction rather than enmity interaction. The last one is friendship. For example, Indonesia and Malaysia, or Indonesia with Russia, they don't see each other as an enemy or as a rival, but as a friend. So in international relations, states construct their identities based on interaction they have. If they perceive each other as an enemy, they define themselves as an enemy, right? So there is no a single identity in international relations.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin. Let's move to another questions from Amalia. Thank you for the insightful presentation, Dr. Rashidin. I have one question. Your presentation illustrates how Indonesia leveraged its anti-colonial identity regarding Gaza while adopting a neutral peacemaker identity regarding Ukraine. When constructing these narrative identities, who do you argue is the primary audience? To what extent is the first condemnation of Israel driven by the need for diplomatic political stability, whereas the diplomatic restraint toward Russia is tailored for an international audience? How does your narrative analyze separate domestic political survival from international ontological security? Thank you.
So there are two questions exactly. Right? All right. Thank you for the questions. The first questions relates to who the audience of Indonesia's condemnation. There are two tier in this situation. The first tier is Indonesia targeted both parties, right? In the first tier. I mean, in the case of Israel invasion, Israel aggression to Palestine, the audience of Indonesia's condemnation is both parties, Palestinian people and Israel government. From Indonesia's perspective, Indonesia should demonstrate its commitment to support Palestinian people. In one hand, on the other hand, Indonesia also demonstrate its commitment to fight against colonialism. This is targeted to directed to Israel government that from Indonesian perspective, Indonesia will not allow any countries in this world to colonize other countries or occupy other countries. All right. So Indonesia does not tolerate that action. In the case of Russia's invasion to Ukraine, yeah, this also applies to this case that Indonesia's audience is directed to both parties. That is Russia or and Ukraine. But unlike Russia, that Indonesia should demonstrate its friendship relationship. Indonesia also by not condemning Russia, Indonesia also demonstrates its commitment to the maintenance of international peace by showing its what you call it its action against illegal breach of other country's sovereignty, right? But not referring Russia as perpetrator of this action. So I think in this case, Indonesia show support for Ukraine by not condemning but supporting the upholding of international law in one hand, but at the other hand, Indonesia also maintains a good relationship with Russia by not condemning Russia's aggression.
Okay, thank you so much. And then let's move to, there are still several questions. Some of the question may be already been answered, but I will read it for you. The first one is from Ms. Inayatul Fitri. It is interesting that you mentioned the free and active policy is still relevant to the Indonesian politics. However, with the current membership with the Board of Peace and long-term issues with China and ASEAN, do you think there is a necessity to reconstruct the free active policy? That's one of the questions. And then maybe we can read another question from Sandra Anahara. Dr. Roshidin, you know that previous literature focuses on the effectiveness of condemnation as diplomatic tool, while your narrative method focuses on how states perceive and enact their identities. By framing Indonesia's neutral tone on Ukraine as an effort to preserve a historical positive relationship with Russia, isn't the narrative approach simply giving a psychological level or ontological security to what is essentially just traditional balance of power diplomacy? Where does narrative identity end and pure strategic calculation begin? Yeah. And the last one, I think, due to another commitment. Okay, no, it's different. Thank you so much. So, okay, those questions, I think we need to address.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. The first one is about is free and active still relevant in today's global politics? My answer is yes, it is. Yeah, it is still relevant, and free and active principle is one of the most genius ideas coined by our founding fathers, Indonesia's founding fathers at the time during after the independence era. This principle um, functions as a anchor for the country to maintain its strategic autonomy in one hand and contribute positively to the creation, to the establishment of long-lasting world peace. So this principle has two main principle for Indonesia's foreign policy, and it serves as an anchor to preserve Indonesia's independence by maintaining its strategic autonomy, and in the other hand, Indonesia also can contribute to the betterment of international society. So if you ask me about the relevance of this principle, my answer is quite simple. Yes, it's relevant. But what my concern is not this principle, but the principle of non-aligned movement, right? And that non-aligned movement should be transformed into multi-alignment rather than non-alignment, because non-alignment implies that Indonesia um, it implies passivity. It implies not taking side, right? But multi-alignment Indonesia is taking side with any other countries, and no favoritism in this sense. So I think Indonesia should adopt multi-alignment rather than non-alignment foreign policy. But with regard to free and active foreign policy, I think it is still relevant and should be maintained as an anchor of Indonesia's foreign policy. And the second question is about is it similar to traditional balance of power logic if we talk about condemnation? My answer is no. Traditional balance of power is purely about power, is about how states preserve their position in international relation, how they not allow, how they will not allow any other countries to dominate the system, right? And it's purely military. It is measured by states' military defense expenditure. It is measured by how many nuclears countries have. It's about military modernization and so on and so forth. But condemnation is not like that. Condemnation is about how states express, how states construct, how states project its identity in the eyes of the international community. It's not about power, it's about identity construction from my point of view. While at the same time, it's not a kind of naive foreign policy, right? So a condemnation is very strategic. It is not only intended to project state's identity, but also its aim at preserving the state's relationship with other countries in order to preserve their national interests. That's all,
Okay.
Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rashidin. So maybe to make it to clarify this. So when actually, so since that in your presentation, in your Q&A session, you mentioned that actually realism maybe is not wrong completely, and then but we have another perspective like constructivist. Maybe to clarify this, make it a better understanding for our audience. So when we need to take some perspective comparing to the other perspective to see the specific issues.
Yeah, if we look at closer in the case of Israel, for example, realis is not working because Indonesia's foreign policy towards this issue is not driven by economic calculation or benefit orientation, but it's about value. It is about Indonesia's commitment to fight against colonialism, right? And this is, I think, something that Indonesia maintain from since independence. This is when Indonesia committed to support Palestinian people, or to uphold the aspiration to create a two-state solution in the Palestinian context. It is not driven by material interest. It is driven by a normative, you call it normative or idealistic or value-based orientation of foreign policy. But in the case of Russia's invasion to Ukraine, it's quite similar with a realist perspective, when a country like Indonesia should maintain their national interests, should maintain their good relationship with Russia, because Indonesia is very, very dependent on Russia in many aspects, right? So when realist is used to explain the case of Russia's invasion to Ukraine, we tend to focus on security issues. We tend to focus on the concept of security dilemma, for example. We tend to focus on the anarchy notion, for example. But from constructivist perspective, we should move beyond that things. We should focus more on ideational elements, such as identity, such as norm, such as how Indonesia construct or Indonesia project its identity towards Russia or Ukraine, rather than focusing on security dilemma or anarchy, or so on and so forth.
Yeah, so maybe there is no one size fit for all theories for every single occasion. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay. So there is another question that maybe is very interesting that we need to discuss from Mr. Garin again. So, hello, Mr. Rashidin. I would like to ask again, if a large-scale global conflict, such as a third world war, were to occur, to what extent would Indonesia's free and active foreign policy be sufficient to safeguard its national security, given its non-aligned approach and the absence of formal military alliances? Okay, that's very challenging, man.
Yeah, that's very hard question. And this would be directed to Menlu Sugiono. All right, I try to answer this very, very difficult question from Mr. Garin. Yes, like I said before, a free and active foreign policy is one of the most genius ideas established by our founding fathers in navigating our foreign policy in dynamic world. But this is something like apa berandai-andai itu. If a third world war occur.
So it's just a scenario, okay?
Yeah.
We want to know what do you think? Or maybe can we flying with the eagles and in the same time dancing with the dragon?
Yeah, I would say that Indonesia could still save with this principle, because a free and active principle ensure that Indonesia will maintain its foreign policy based on strategic autonomy principle. Indonesia should not take side with one side, or Indonesia should engage in these major wars, but Indonesia chose to stay away from the conflict and trying its best to promote peace using its reputation as a peacemaker. Whether or not it's effective, regardless of its effectiveness, I think Indonesia using this free and active could play a more confidence, could play more effective in promoting international peace by, for example, by building a coalition of willing with other middle powers, for example, to promote or to de-escalate the war instead of take side that could jeopardize our national interests.
Okay, so maybe do you think that a friend to all is a friend to none?
Million
What
friends,
do you
zero
think?
enemy.
So what do you think about that? Because if the scenario becoming more radical, more extreme situation, what do you think? Do you see it still relevant to becoming multi-alignment like what you've mentioned?
Yeah, based on a pragmatic principle, multi-alignment could serve as a safety net for Indonesia's foreign policy, right? By not taking side with, by not implementing favoritism foreign policy, by not taking side with conflicting parties, Indonesia could build a good relationship with any other countries for the benefit of the people of Indonesia, I think. And Indonesia could play a very effective in promoting international peace. Yeah. This not this situation will not jeopardize Indonesia's position. But again, this depends largely on who leads Indonesia.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin. And then we have another comment here. A friend to all is a threat to none. So I think the question is, what if the threat happen and then we should be try to find for seeking for help? Okay, that's another good discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings us to the end of our time to this session. And I would like to express my thanks to all participants for your thoughtful questions and contribution to this vibrant discussion. And most importantly, our highest appreciate goes to Dr. Rashidin for dedicating his time and sharing such a compelling framework for understanding the nuance of Indonesian diplomacy and foreign policy. So let us give a virtual round of applause to our speaker, Dr. Rashidin, for our appreciation. Thank you once again, Dr. Rashidin. I think this is very insightful discussions. So I think we already lack of time. So I think that's all for today. I give back this session to the committee. Thank you so much, Dr. Rashidin, and then also all the participants.
Thank you, Mas Fendi. Thank you, everyone.
What a wonderful way to conclude today's discussions. Thank you very much to Dr. Muhammad Rashidin and our respected moderator, Mr. Fendi, for sharing such valuable knowledge and perspectives with all of us. The session was truly enlightening, and I believe we've all gained a deeper understanding of politics of condemnation and international crimes.
We'd also like to extend our sincere appreciation to all participants for your enthusiasm, thoughtful question, and active engagement throughout today's discussion. And once again, we'd like to remind everyone who has not yet completed today's attendance to kindly do so through the link shared in the Zoom chat or the official WhatsApp group.
Well then, before we officially conclude today's program, let's capture one last moment together. Kindly turn on your cameras and give us your brightest smiles. Is everyone ready? Can we see everybody's beautiful faces?
Don't forget to smile.
Okay, let's wait a little bit for everybody, to turn on their cameras. I see a lot of faces, but yes, the more, the better. Come on, everybody. Do not be so shy. Okay, the committee, are you guys ready? Maybe strike the pose. I'm counting from 3, 2, 1. Smile, everybody. Another pose. 3, 2, 1. What about day 2? It's day 2, everybody. Let's strike this pose. Day 2, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you so much. I think that's enough, yeah?
Okay, what a great smile. Thank you, everyone. Those were wonderful smiles.
Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of day 2 of IRUD Summer Course 2026. We sincerely hope today's sessions have been both enriching and inspiring, and that you've gained valuable insights from today's discussions.
Yes, we look forward to welcoming all of you back tomorrow for another exciting day of insightful discussion and also learning.
Absolutely. But before we conclude, we would like to sincerely apologize for any shortcomings or inconveniences that may have occurred throughout today's program. Your understanding and support mean a great deal to us. And to remind you once again that we are so far from over, this is only day 2, and our finale session will be held on August the 13th. So please keep up the spirit and be more active and respectful to each other. Thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll see you again tomorrow for day 3 of IRUD Summer Course 2026. Goodbye. See you tomorrow, everybody.